We just had more news break literally right before I recorded this. Derrick Henry signs a 2-year deal with the Baltimore Ravens up to $20 million. Now, of course, that $20 million number is not guaranteed. Now, it's not a Saquon Barkley deal. It's not even a DeAndre Swift deal, at least on the surface. I'm looking at it right now. But Derrick Henry going to the Baltimore Ravens makes so much sense from a real-life perspective, both for Baltimore as well as Henry. If you think about what the Baltimore Ravens do, this is an offense that wants to run the ball more than any other team in the NFL. This is an offense that doesn't necessarily need a receiving back, given Lamar's capability on what he can do on the ground. We know a lot of times those stationary pocket passer types, the Phillip Rivers back in the day, he needed his Austin Eckler. The pocket collapses. He has no other option but to check the ball down because he's not going to be able to evade the pressure. Lamar Jackson, the pocket collapses. Oh, okay, I'll run and go pick up the first down myself. So you don't necessarily need a running back that's going to catch the ball. You need a running back that can handle an immense amount of volume, and Lamar is going to provide efficiency for that running back. We've seen Gus Edwards be a top 5 running back in the NFL in yards per carry. Dobbins led the NFL in yards per carry his rookie season. Is it because these are the best running backs in the NFL? No. It's because if you're running alongside Lamar Jackson, Lamar goes to hand the ball off. You have to worry about, 1, it obviously being a play action pass. 2, Derrick Henry running it down your throat. And 3, you have to worry about Lamar tucking it himself, running out across the edge and picking up the first down on his own. So if you're a linebacker, you can't crash down. You kind of have to freeze. You kind of have to be playing on your heels. And that provides so much efficiency for the running backs playing alongside Lamar. So this is a perfect fit from a real life perspective. I think that it makes so much sense. This is what everybody's been saying about since we knew that Derrick Henry was going to leave. And if you look at Derrick Henry, 303 carries in 2019 leads the NFL. 2020, 378 carries leads the NFL. 2021, in 8 games, he has 219 carries. He was on pace for over 400 carries, easily leading the NFL this season if he did not get hurt. He leads the NFL in carries in 2022. He leads the NFL in carries in 2023. Derrick Henry over the past 5 years has essentially been the league's top rusher in terms of volume. The efficiency hasn't necessarily been there. I mean, he's only been top of the NFL in rushing yards twice. That was back in 2019 and in 2020. We can safely say that this past year is probably the worst year that we have seen from Derrick Henry from an efficiency standpoint. I mean, pretty much through his entire NFL career. But to be fair to Derrick Henry, this was a horrendous situation in Tennessee. You're running behind one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. You have the combo of Ryan Tannehill / rookie season Will Levis as your starting quarterbacks. And it's a bad team, a bad offense in general. Now, so I want to get all the positives out of the way when we're talking about Henry. I mean everything that I just said with all the positives that you have on that profile. Going over to the negatives, this is a 29-year-old running back going into his age 30 season. Derrick Henry, if you compare him to all 29-year-old running backs since the year 2000 that posted similar years, doesn't appear to have a crazy ceiling. The best RB that we saw was work done in his age 30 season at 13.5 points. You had a couple of really good running backs here like Steven Jackson. You had Hall of Fame Frank Gore. But keep in mind, when you're 30 years old, you're only averaging 12 points per game if you're those players. So the base level expectation based off historical analysis, based off the historical range of outcomes we should be looking at is about 12.5 fantasy points per game, kind of what Frank Gore did at 30 years old. But I think it's unfair to just stop there because the situation will be much better in Baltimore than it was in Tennessee. So I think you should expect not necessarily 12.5 points per game. I think you should expect Derrick Henry to be much better than what the historical data tells us to be. I think you probably expect him to be like a low-end RB1 in a non-PPR format. The receiving volume's not going to be there. Lamar doesn't dump the ball off. Derrick Henry's not a great pass catcher. So you're not really going to have any receiving volume. So in a PPR format, I think you're expecting like a mid RB2, maybe a low-end RB2, dependent on what we see across the league. But still, obviously a contending piece. If you're a rebuilding roster, you have no business with him. I think you should pencil him in as, just call it a mid RB2 this next season. Now, Calvin Ridley, we don't have official news yet. as soon as Ridley signs, of course, I'm going to run over to flockfantasy.com and I'll get y'all his updated ranking on the site immediately. And yeah, I'm going to be updating our rankings with all the free agent news. Excited for y'all to see where we have Drake London ranked. We actually have Darnell Mooney going over to Atlanta as well. But nonetheless, of course, if you want to check out any of our rankings, find them all on the site. The links in the description, comment section. Promo code FLOCK. We get you 30% off any sub, plus my Dynasty Fantasy Football rankings, plus the rankings of all your favorite creators on YouTube, plus all their premium content, all the Dynasty Rookie Draft Guides, the Dynasty Trade Calculator, the Dynasty Trade Finder, and if you use code FLOCK, both that 30% off, as well as yours truly breaking down your Dynasty team in a podcast. But going over to what we have with our next signing, we have Jameis Winston going to the Browns. I think it's just going to raise the floor for the Browns players, right? Still, you should expect Deshaun Watson to be the starting quarterback here, but now at least the Browns have something that they can do if Deshaun Watson gets injured. Not saying that Jameis is a good real-life quarterback, but Jameis is a pretty good fantasy option. He's going to air the ball out. He should have a lot of yards for both Amari as well as Jerry Jeudy if that does happen. So, yeah, I mean, I think you should be pretty excited if you are a Jerry Jeudy owner. Obviously not making any dramatic changes, but it just gives you a little bit of a higher floor in case Deshaun Watson's complete toast. Now, going over to our next guy, Darnell Mooney going to Atlanta. $26 million guaranteed. Darnell Mooney's getting paid more money than Saquon Barkley. I understand. I am not an idiot. Yes, wide receiver is worth significantly more than running back. But does Darnell Mooney impact an offense? Of course I'm an idiot. I don't know. It's just crazy to see Darnell Mooney getting paid more money than Saquon Barkley. I think this helps the offense. Makes so much sense from a real life perspective. While Darnell Mooney's not great, he's a capable wide receiver too, much better than what they had. I don't think this really hurts Drake London. I don't think this hurts Kyle Pitts. Probably helps Kirk Cousins just a bit. I'm not viewing Darnell Mooney as like a serious option in fantasy, maybe outside of underdog best ball leagues. But still, I think it just makes a lot of sense from a real life perspective for Atlanta to get a wide receiver 2 in here. Now, a lot happened in Cincinnati over the past 24 hours. First, we got the report that Mixon was being released so Zach Moss could go there. And then Houston went, oh, you're releasing him? How about I trade for him? Houston went out there and Houston got Joe Mixon. Now, if you're looking at Mixon, we're about to compare him with Aaron Jones as well. Joe Mixon and Aaron Jones were both in that 2017 draft class. The difference is Joe Mixon was the youngest running back in the class. He was possibly the youngest player in that draft. The man was barely 20 years old. It's crazy. So going into this next year, Joe Mixon's going to be 28 years old. Joe Mixon this past year, obviously not a great season. Barely cracked 1,000 yards. The year prior didn't crack 1,000 rushing yards. He's had a considerable amount of touchdown volume, which has been nice. 12 touchdowns this past year. And it was in a very bad offense with no Joe Burrow here as well. But a couple different things in play. One, the people in the building that get to see Joe Mixon every single day and that have seen Joe Mixon throughout his entire career in Cincinnati, they looked at him every single day and they went, yeah, this ain't the same guy. We don't need him anymore. Yes, Houston is another Super Bowl contender in the AFC. Y'all can have him. Cool. We'll bring in Zach Moss. So one, we have the data point that the team that had him doesn't want him. Not a good sign regardless. Two, if you're looking at this with Joe Mixon, going into his age 28 season, we know running backs fall off. We go ahead and plug in what we've had from every running back since the year 2000. That comp similar to Joe Mixon. You had Matt Forte. Matt Forte was great. 21 points per game the following season. Mixon does that. You should be freaking pumped. Warwick Dunn, 15 points per game. James Conner, 14 points per game. That would be very good as well. Then you get Ernest Graham, 12.5. David Johnson at 12. And then you have the bums. Michael Bush was a bum at 28 years old, 6.5 points. Le'Veon Bell was a bum, 6.1 points. Liddell Betts, bum, 5.2 points. Dalvin Cook, bum, 3.2 points this past season. So you see that there is that high ceiling with Joe Mixon based off historical data. There's that very low floor with Joe Mixon based off historical data. I think it's all in the range of outcomes. I think Mixon may go over to Houston and just show that he's complete toast. And this may be a Dalvin Cook situation from this past year. Is it guaranteed? Of course not. He has upside. And I'd be willing to bet a little more on Mixon than Aaron Jones. Because with the Packers, they decided we're going to give Josh Jacobs a lot of money. We're going to surprise everybody. We're going to piss off Packers fans. Okay. Now, I don't really see anybody in Cincinnati getting mad about Joe Mixon leaving. It seemed like a lot of the Cincinnati fan base was kind of over Mixon, kind of understand that he's not the guy that he once was. I see a lot of Packers fans not super happy that Aaron Jones is going to be a Minnesota Viking. Understandably so. Obviously, gives us career to Green Bay, but let's start off a couple different things. One, the team that was in the same building with them, that gets to see him every single day, they looked at him and went, yep, not the same player he once was. Let's go ahead. Let's let him go. Yes, he was phenomenal in his prime. Yes, he was one of the better players that the Packers have selected on day 3 of the NFL draft. I mean, since the year 2017, he was an absolute smash for Green Bay when he was there. Fan favorite. They decided, okay, we're ready to move on. On top of this, if you're looking at Aaron Jones, this is a running back that just posted probably the worst year of his NFL career. 2 rushing touchdowns in an offense with Jordan Love. 2 rushing touchdowns the year prior as well. So over the past, say, 28 games, he's had 4 rushing touchdowns total. He was at 59.5 rushing yards per game this past season. 21.5 receiving yards per game. This was his lowest mark as a receiver that you've seen since 2018, his second year in the NFL. So he looks to be on the decline. It's natural that he's on the decline, considering that this past year was his age 29 season. And the team that has him just decided, well, we don't need him. Our division rival can have him instead. So starting baseline point, bad for Aaron Jones. Then you move on to what we've seen from running backs that perform similarly to Aaron Jones at 29, going to 30. Out of the 10 most comparable guys, there were 2 guys that were fantasy viable the next year. You had Fred Jackson and Mark Ingram. It's possible Aaron Jones is good, but the historical data tells us a running back with this profile going into his age 30 season is probably hitting the cliff and is probably done skis similar to Dalvin Cook this past year. You add on the fact that he's going from Green Bay, a team with Jordan Love, a team with a great coaching staff, a team that had the familiarity with Aaron Jones, to instead a team that just signed Sam Darnold, that may still go out there and take a quarterback in the draft, but they have Darnold under center. They have phenomenal weapons across the board. They don't necessarily need to feature Aaron Jones. If they can get the ball to Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson, they're just fine. So I think that this is a situation where he's already on the decline. There are red flags everywhere. His situation just got worse. I would rather have someone like Mixon, who's younger, going to a better situation in Houston. But obviously, Aaron Jones, fan favorite. I think people are excited. Staying in Minnesota, like we said, Sam Darnold going over there. They could still draft Bo Nix. They could still draft J.J. McCarthy. They could still go out there and take Michael Penix Jr. Whatever they do, it's probably not good for Jefferson. It's probably not good for Jordan Addison. We'll talk about Justin Fields in a bit too, because, I mean, we look at some of these other quarterbacks. The Jets going for Tyrod Taylor, obviously backing up Aaron Rodgers, giving some depth, making sure they don't have the same debacle they did last year. The Pats signed Jacoby Brissett. Now, this screams, okay, yeah, we're just going to be taking a rookie. We'll have Brissett in there, journeyman quarterback. Hopefully he can show the rookie the ropes. So hopefully he can teach him a thing or two. Say the same thing that you have with the Marcus Mariota signing going over to Washington. Oh, if we take Jaden Daniels, if we take Drake May, Mariota, can you show him how to be a professional? Seems pretty standard. But you look across the board here with all these quarterback signings, and you look at the potential landing spots for Justin Fields. I don't know. Okay. No, some people are screaming that he's going to be going and staying in Chicago and he's going to be the starting quarterback for the Chicago Bears next year. I'll tell you right now, I mean, you still look at Vegas sportsbooks. They're pricing in Caleb Williams to be the number 1 overall pick to the Chicago Bears. Vegas sportsbooks know more than you do, more than I do. They know more than everybody. So I do not buy that Justin Fields will be the starter for Chicago. Maybe by the time you're watching this video, the man's gotten traded. They found a spot for him somewhere. It's not looking great, though. Not looking great with all these quarterbacks finding homes. Now, going over to our next spot, you have Derrick Johnson. Let's talk about all this. Derrick Johnson, Nyheim Hines, Chase Edmonds, all finding teams. Chase Edmonds going over to the Bucks. Nyheim Hines going over to the Browns. Derrick Johnson staying on the Jags. So if you're looking at this, completely understands why you kind of want to roll your eyes and saying, Mason, why are we even talking about this? Obviously, none of these running backs are exciting, right? I mean, maybe we can say, oh, okay, Derrick Johnson going to Jacksonville. This negatively impacts Tank Bigsby, blah, blah, blah. But on the surface, it doesn't have a big time impact regardless. However, something that is important to point out here is I think that this is a good opportunity to buy any of these starting running backs if anybody in your league shows weakness. If for whatever reason someone in your league thinks, oh, Derrick Johnson going over to Jacksonville, maybe I'm a little bit scared off of Travis Etienne, buy Travis Etienne. Nyheim Hines going over to Cleveland, scare someone off Nick Chubb, buy Nick Chubb. Chase Edmonds going over to Tampa, scare someone off Rachaad White, buy Rachaad White. Because I view it the exact opposite. I think that these running backs coming in, that is a good thing for the players that are in this offense. The reason being is if Chase Edmonds goes over to Tampa, Tampa all of a sudden, when they get to the NFL draft and they look at their team needs, they look at that running back position, they go, yeah, we could address it, but we have a little more depth, right? Whereas they go into the draft and they are sitting there with Rachaad White and nothing else, they go, this is a clear spot. We really need a running back. We really need to add some depth to this room. And then they see Jonathan Brooks there in the second round. They click that button. They see Trey Benson there in round 3. They click that button and they bring in serious competition for Rachaad White. Having someone like Chase Edmonds there, if it makes the coaching staff think this isn't as much of a need as we initially thought, it kind of guards these running backs from having to deal with serious competition coming in. And obviously, every team at every position is going to need depth. So when that team addresses depth at the running back position, you want it to be Derrick Johnson. You want it to be someone like Chase Edmonds. You want it to be someone who's not a real threat to the actual starter on the team. Now, Gesicki going over to New England doesn't really matter. I mean, if you were excited about Hunter Henry, I don't know why. I mean, I'm not really worried about Gesicki, though. I don't even know why we're mentioning it. Going over to Noah Fant. Noah Fant gets paid. I love Noah Fant as a prospect. I mean, hell, Noah Fant just gets a $21 million deal from the Seattle Seahawks. If you look at this, I think I will probably give some respect to Noah Fant in our Dynasty rankings when we update them today. He didn't really show anything in Seattle. Hasn't showed much in a very long time now. But at the same time, the contract speaks. He was a great prospect. We know tight ends take a very long time as well. So maybe you do want to be excited about him. And then going over to Gus Edwards, he signs. It looks like it's a good landing spot. I completely understand why you would want to be excited. But still at the same time, this is a running back that has no upside to catch the ball. I don't think he's a special athlete. I wish I would have drafted him in underdog drafts last year because obviously we would have made a considerable amount of money, but I don't know. I still think that this is a prime situation for another running back to land in. I think that you could very easily see the Chargers going out there, drafting Blake Corum, drafting Trey Benson, drafting Jonathan Brooks, drafting Marshawn Lloyd, drafting Jalen Wright, drafting someone to actually take over this backfield. And I'd be very excited about that player. But I think that's all I got for you. Really appreciate you and really hope we get to see you out tomorrow.